If you are new to Lavish Nutrition, if you're new to me or to my page, I'm Laura. It's so nice to meet you, meet you over the Facebook Live. I'm a mom of two, I'm a holistic nutritionist, and I am the founder of the Lavish Method, where I just teach women, who want to lose weight, a simple way of eating that doesn't involve giving up wine or chocolate, my favorite things in the world, which are deal breakers for me. And so I come on here every Wednesday night. We come on at 8 o'clock. Sometimes I will, take a recommendation or a question from somebody and I will talk about that. Tonight I actually kind of was looking through some notes, and I kind of try to keep notes of things people ask me in the past, clients or friends or family or just like random people who message me things on the internet, because I find when you start to see patterns and you start to see things get asked a lot, it gives me an idea that might be something that I can create some content on and educate you guys on. And so one of the things that's come up a lot lately is what's better for fat loss? Is it having like 5 or 6 small meals in a day, or is it having like 2 or 3 big meals? Because I know when I was in my dieting heyday in my teens and 20s, it was always said that if you wanted to lose weight, you had to have small meals kind of spaced more frequently throughout the day. That was supposed to be the best for fat loss. And so I kind of grew up just believing that was the case and believing that grazing was better than sitting down and having a full meal. So I wanted to talk about that tonight. Did any of you guys grow up with that old adage too? Does anyone here think, if you're watching and you think that smaller meals more frequently are better for fat loss, go ahead and type it in the chat or hit the like. Just let me know. I'm curious if you guys already know the answer to this, or if you guys are pretty set on what you have been taught is the best way to go about this. So I'm not seeing anybody. So you guys might be ridiculously, sure did. Kathy says sure did. Amazing. And I know Kathy doesn't anymore. I know that because Kathy follows the Lavish Method. And so this is going to be a little bit of a hashtag spoiler, but the Lavish Method doesn't rely on small meals throughout the day. And there's a really good reason, because for me, when I come up with diet myths and when I come up with things, kind of out of the blue that I've always believed that I don't really know why I believe and they don't seem to work, I like to go back to the science. So let's go back to the science. Let's go back to how food digests and what that all means. And we can talk about that in relation to fat loss, and we can figure out whether small meals more frequently are better than large meals spaced further apart. So if you've watched any of my videos, any of my content before, you probably know a little bit about the macronutrients, right? We have fat, we have protein, we have carbohydrates, and the way they digest changes what hormones are expressed and whether we store or release fat, right? That's kind of like the basic tenements of what I like to teach. So the main hormone that we want to control when it comes to fat loss is insulin. And insulin is released basically whenever you eat something that sends sugar into your blood or energy, and basically causes your blood sugar to spike, and insulin comes in and it takes it out, and then insulin either gives it to the cells to use for energy or it stores it as fat, right? So insulin is your fat storage hormone. And so when we're losing fat, one of the key things we want to do is we want to have low insulin. We want insulin to stay low and steady. We do not want it to spike, because when insulin spikes, we tend to store fat. So right away, I think you can kind of get on board with eating more frequently means that we are probably causing insulin to spike more often, right? Because you're eating more frequently. And so you're probably putting yourself at risk of storing more fat. And I'll elaborate with that too, because the way that macronutrients digest, carbohydrates digest really, really quickly. Fats take a long time to digest, proteins somewhere in the middle. Fat doesn't really touch your insulin, like it doesn't cause an insulin spike. Carbohydrates cause a big insulin spike, and then proteins kind of a moderate insulin spike. And so you can think about this, if you're structuring small meals that are close together, it would probably mean that they're digesting quickly in order for you to be hungry enough to eat another small meal, in an hour or however long you're having your next one. And so that means they're most likely to be carbohydrate based. And I think that's pretty true, especially if we look at the typical diet foods, things like fat-free yogurt, things like 100-calorie snack packs, things like, oatmeal, overnight oats, crackers. All of those things are carbohydrate based. And so they digest really quickly and they spike insulin. and insulin causes fat storage, right? So that's kind of the first side of the coin. So if you kind of look at it from digestion and in terms of what you're actually eating, if you're eating small meals, then it definitely doesn't seem to favor that in terms of fat loss. And I mean, if we eat small meals and they're full of fat and protein, they take a long time to digest, so we're still not going to be eating super frequently and our insulin's still not going to be spiking. But the small meals I'm referring to that most of you are eating are most likely carbohydrate based. So that's number one. The second, does that resonate? Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Sometimes I get a little off topic, and I try really hard to do these lives completely unscripted because I think it allows us to kind of just go where questions go and to just kind of tell you what I feel like should come out in the moment. And so, okay, I see some thumbs up, so that's good. Okay. It's resonating. So the second side of the coin, and this isn't going to be a super long Facebook Live today unless you guys have questions, in which case I can stay on a little bit later and answer them. But I think this is a pretty simple, straightforward concept, which is great. So the second side of the coin is if you are trying to lose fat, let's just look at this from a logical point of view. If you are trying to lose fat, sorry, we need a wine break first. Okay. If you are trying to lose fat, that means you can think of fat. It's leftovers that your body has stored in little Tupperware containers at the back of the fridge for later because you couldn't eat it all in one sitting, right? So you made a big turkey dinner. You only had like 7 people. You were supposed to have 14. You've got leftovers. So what you do with the leftovers is you put them into the fridge until the next time you need to eat, and then you pull out the leftovers and you eat them. That's how fat's kind of meant to be used, right? Except if you put a leftover in the fridge and then you keep putting new food in on top of it, and you do a grocery shop and then you put more new food and then you eat that food, and then you do another grocery shop and then you eat that food, and then you continually push the other food to the back, what's going to happen is you're going to forget about those leftovers, and those leftovers are going to pile up, and every time you make something new, you're going to have a little more leftover, and before you know it, your fridge is like a moldy, disgusting leftover mess, right? So think of fat as leftovers that are hanging out. I must have a commercial size. Oh, Kathy. Think of it as having, right, all these leftovers in the back, and if you continuously eat other things, you're never going to use your leftovers, right? So if you're always eating, if you're eating every 2 or 3 hours all day long, when is your body ever going to need to use the leftovers that it's packed away for later? Like, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right? Like, think about it that way. Instead, what works really well when it comes to fat loss is having bigger meals that are fat and protein heavy because they don't spike insulin the same way. They take a nice long time to digest. They leave your blood sugar really even so you don't crave junk foods in between. And then you stretch out those meals so that there are points in there where your body's actually going in and using the leftovers. So the best way to take advantage that I've found with myself and with clients, the best way to take advantage of this, if you look at it from this viewpoint, right? So many different viewpoints to look at fat loss, which is so why I love it. It's so interesting. But if you look at it from this viewpoint, if you have your dinner, okay, nice big solid dinner, and you go to bed, and so say you have your last meal at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. and you sleep until 7 p.m. or 7 a.m. Hopefully you don't sleep a 24-hour day. And so say you that's a 12-hour period. Well, odds are for about the first 8 hours after you've stopped eating and gone to bed, you're running off of leftover fuel, the food, not leftover, the food you've kind of given yourself for dinner, right? Because you're not doing a lot, you're sleeping, it doesn't take a ton of energy. But after that point, your body still needs fuel to function. It constantly needs fuel. So after that point, you're actually dipping into the leftovers, the fat, right? So you're actually getting into that stored fat. And so this is where and I'm kind of going off topic, but this is where so many people go wrong, because then in the morning, they get up and they put a high carb breakfast into their system, and you know that carbohydrates spike your insulin, they unbalance your blood sugar, and they cause you to store more fat. So you immediately, as soon as you have that high carbohydrate meal, you move out of that nice, slow, leftover using up, fat burning stage you were in, and you move into the sugar burning stage and the fat storing stage. Whereas, if you can extend your morning fast a little bit, wait a little bit, maybe and this is a little bit of a later technique, because if you don't have balanced blood sugar to begin with, you can't extend in the morning because you'll feel awful. So this is something to do once you've already figured out how to balance your meals, how to have enough fat, protein, and carbohydrates throughout the day to actually work into a fat burning mode. But once you've done that, if you can actually extend that fast a little bit in the morning, by either having just like a nice supercharged fatty coffee and then waiting a little while until you're actually really hungry for breakfast, or just, waiting till you're really hungry for breakfast, that whole time that you're up and at 'em and moving, your body's still using your leftovers, right? So you have to think about it in that sense, where you need to stop giving yourself food every 2 to 3 hours. You don't need to do that. Snacking is not really a thing. It's not something that we as humans evolved to do. We evolved to have, we hunted, we had a big meal, we spent a day hunting and gathering, and then had a big meal. We had one big meal, maybe two, right? That's how we're primed to use food. We don't need to eat every 2 to 3 hours. The problem is the foods we're eating are super high carb food with very little fat, not enough protein, not enough nutrients, and so we're hungry all the time, right? Because our body's not getting what it needs. So if you look at it that way, and hopefully that's making sense, and hopefully I was able to keep that clear enough and concise enough, if you look at it that way, then a couple big meals, that's where it's at. So the point I'm at right now in the way I eat, and this works really well for me, and everybody is different, so it may not work as well for you. You may need to tweak it a bit. But for me, I get up in the morning and I have my supercharged coffee. So I have coffee with coconut oil and collagen protein powder in it. And that is all I need, usually for 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, sometimes a bit longer. And then I basically work off 2 main meals that I'll have. I'll have something around maybe 11 or 12, and then I'll have something around 5 or 6. And that's it. And it's not because I actually started out eating that way, and I didn't. I started out eating super frequently, 5 or 6 times a day, always snacking. Then I moved into the way I eat now, and I was eating probably 3 meals a day and some snacks. And then you just kind of slowly, once your blood sugar becomes balanced and you actually start to listen to hunger cues, it's really strange when you start actually knowing when you're hungry and when you're not, and not going off just cues that, oh, I should eat it this time. It's funny how these rhythms just kind of make themselves known. So for me, that rhythm works really well. And so for you, you might not get to that point right away, or you may not ever. Maybe your body does need 3 meals a day, but it doesn't need 5. It doesn't need 5. And especially not if you're talking fat loss. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at this through a lens of fat loss, right? So there are other circumstances where maybe you do need to eat small meals throughout the day. That could work really well for somebody who has digestive distress, somebody with IBS. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about fat loss. So I want to make that clear, because there's never a one set way of eating that works for everyone, but there are things that work for different stages and different conditions, and I'm talking fat loss. So Kathy says, so the rule that breakfast is essential is not necessarily true. Absolutely not. As you know, supercharged coffee and then nothing until 2:30. Yeah, absolutely not. So, but here's the thing. If you're eating a standard way of eating with a lot of carbs, then yes, breakfast is essential, because you'll feel like garbage, within an hour and a half, because your blood sugar will be so far gone, because your body has not been taught how to burn anything but sugar, how to burn anything but carbs, and you don't store carbs. So for people who are following my way of eating, the lavish method, for people who have learned how to balance their macros, that is totally not necessary. And in fact, most people who practice, high-fat eating, especially if they work in some intermittent fasting or eating windows, they don't usually eat breakfast at all like that. And that's fine, because your body knows how to process fat. It's a whole different ballgame. So I'm not saying, for anyone watching here who is new to this and who is still eating a lot of carbohydrates and your breakfast still consists of toast or bagels or cereal or whatever, no judgment. But if that's the case, don't just get off of this, go to, okay, I have to have 3 meals a day, have your high carb meals, be starving and hangry because your blood sugar is going to be all over the place, and then shake your fist at me because it didn't work, right? So it's all about where you're at, what your goals are, and how to make that work using food, because it changes based on all those things. But yes, I hope that makes sense. For you, Kathy, 100% breakfast is not necessary. I haven't had breakfast lately. In fact, I was away on the weekend, and we were somewhere with a generator, so there's no constant hydro, and so everyone kind of has to eat at the same time. And I had to eat breakfast kind of pretty early in the morning, and I felt not great for 2 solid days because I'm not used to eating that much food that early, because basically I had what I would normally have at 10, maybe 11 or 12. I had it at like 8:30 or 9. And I felt gross. I felt slow. I felt sluggish. I felt like bloated. It was the same food that I would normally eat a little bit later in the day, but it didn't work for me. So it's important to kind of meet yourself where you're at, see what's going to work for you. Are there any questions before I hop off? That's really it. That's what I wanted to come on and talk to you guys about tonight. So for anyone who is watching right now, I'm just going to take a little wine break, and then I'm going to wrap this up because I'm out of brain power after being at the dance studio for 3 hours, working all day, all the things. I'm done. So for those of you who are intrigued by this, who don't really know much about the way that I teach you to eat, who are looking to lose fat and do it in a sane way that makes sense and doesn't rely on willpower and trying to evade cravings and all the crazy stuff we do, I'm running a webinar this coming Tuesday. I'm really excited about it. It's a brand new webinar. It's got lots of information in it, some of which was in my last webinar, but this is kind of a little bit more in depth. It definitely goes more into the fat loss, more into how to get into that hormonal state. I'm really excited about it. So it's this coming Tuesday. It's free. And if you want to sign up, if you want to save your seat, it's getting pretty full, but I believe there's still some registrations left. You can go to my website at www.lavishnutrition.com, and you go to the free resources, and there's a free webinar where you can sign up there. I'll also post it in the description of this Facebook Live when I finish and can edit it. So I will do that. And that's really it. That's all I've got for you. Do you or anyone, have a good recipe for pumpkin spice supercharged coffee? I don't. I'm not. Okay, sorry, this is gonna make me really unpopular. I'm not a really big fan of pumpkin spice. So what I would say, I would Google it. I would just Google it, but I would probably myself, because I have no patience for recipes, I would probably buy a can of just pure pumpkin, nothing with sugar added, just pure pumpkin. I'd probably put maybe a teaspoon of that in. I'd put in some pumpkin spice mix, because you can buy just spices. I'd put in that, or maybe just some cinnamon and cardamom, maybe keep it really simple. And then I just add in what I would normally add in, some coconut oil and collagen powder, and I blend it up. I bet that would taste like pumpkins. It probably tastes better than the chemically pumpkin spice. And if you disagree with me, we can agree to disagree. I know it's a hot topic. Connie says, how long does it take to kick back into ketosis at a rough weekend? Okay, it depends. So ketosis, for those of you who are watching who may not know what that is, ketosis is when your body is really primed to burn fat for fuel instead of sugar. So you basically eat very, very, very few carbs. You keep them to under 30 to 50 net grams of carbs per day. And what that does is it forces your body to utilize the fat burning pathway. It's a fantastic way to eat if you want to lose weight. It's also fantastic for some other things. It's great for mental clarity. But when you do, kind of go off the wagon, which is fine, then it kicks you out of it. Oh, dogs are going crazy. As usual, it kicks you out of it, and so it takes some time to get back into it. So Connie, you've been doing it for a little while, so I would give it 2 or 3 days. It shouldn't take long. If you use, I know you have the Perfect Keto supplement. If you actually use that, it doesn't take long at all, because that actually produces the ketones and gets your body going back into it. So I would just have a dose of that in the morning, a dose of that in the evening, and then maybe do that for 2 or 3 days, and you'll get right back into it pretty quick. Just go back into the way you're eating. It'll be fine. 2 or 3 days. Drink lots of water. Make sure you get enough electrolytes as your body kind of transfers over, because you've probably been holding on to fluid if you were eating more carbohydrates. So as you kind of kick back into burning fat for fuel, you will lose a lot of that fluid, and it can throw off your electrolytes, which can make you feel a little garbagey. So just make sure you keep those up, and you'll be good to go. Any other questions? I'm seeing, so the rule that's, thanks, Connie says, thanks, you're welcome. Anybody else, or are we gonna wrap it up? I think we're gonna wrap it up. So for everybody who tuned in live, thank you for coming and hanging out with me. I love these Wednesday night lives, I honestly do. I think they're so much fun. I love chatting with you guys. I think it's just such a great hour or half an hour, however long it ends up being every single week. Yeah, if you're watching this on the replay, if you have questions, just type them in the comments. I will be sure to come back, double check them, and answer them for you. Like I said earlier, if you guys are intrigued, you want to know more, and you're into this whole September reset, because September is totally the new January, and you want to figure out how to eat once and for all and actually lose fat and not gain it back and not feel like garbage, join my free webinar. You can find it on my website, or I will put the URL in the description of this live, because we're going to go in depth. I'm going to teach you my strategy for fat loss, and I'm really excited about it. So that is it for tonight. Kathy says thanks. Connie says thanks. You're welcome, guys. Have a fantastic rest of your first week back to real life, if you have children, or if you've been on summer holidays, and we will talk super soon. Okay.